What's going on, guys? Welcome to a new video. So you've seen the title then. Today I'm going to walk you through step by step the exact Facebook ad strategy that I used to generate purchases for less than $5. So there's not really a lot more to say. I've got my Facebook ad account open, so let's jump straight into it. What is going on, guys? Welcome to my computer. So let's jump straight into the video then actually, and first things first, I want to show you guys some results. So this is just for one particular campaign. Then there's 5 ad sets within this one campaign, and the first number I want to show you guys then is this per purchase cost here. So this is the average cost across this campaign, which was £3.63. As you can see, some of the ad sets were more expensive than that. There was this particular one which was cheaper. And then the next number I want to show you guys is the cost per link click, just because the first stage, the first ad set we're going to be creating in this strategy then requires you to know what your cost per link click is. But before we actually jump into the strategy then, I just want to refresh the page and actually show you guys that these aren't fake results. I'm not trying to mislead you guys. I've had a couple of people post on some past videos because I didn't refresh the page, so I just wanted to do that just to kind of prove to you guys that I'm not trying to mislead you or anything like that. So anyway, that being said, let's jump into the strategy itself. In fact, before we get into this, again, a couple of other things I want to show you. So this is Facebook's business website, where they basically just give you information and recommendations on how to get the most out of your Facebook ads. So some interesting numbers just to make you guys aware of, again, because this strategy then, like I said in the intro, is kind of based on my own past experiences, but then at the same time, I pretty much got all my information from this website when I first started, and then I kind of adapt it to pretty much come up with my own strategies and pretty much find out what works. So this is the first thing I want to show you guys, which is your ad set needs 50 conversions per week. So the key thing there is ad set, not campaign. One particular ad set needs 50 conversions per week for our delivery system to learn who it's best then to show your ads to. So when you hear a lot of people on YouTube talking about duplicating ad sets, that's not necessarily always the best thing to do, because like it says here, the optimization then works on an ad set level. So when you duplicate an ad set, then essentially you're pretty much creating a brand new ad set, and there's no then past data or past optimization for that particular ad set. So just something to consider when we're going through this strategy. So moving swiftly on then, I've got a bit conscious of the recent video lengths. They've all been pushing like 20 minutes. So I want to try and cut it down and make it as information packed as possible. So the next thing is, if there aren't enough people visiting your website, so at least 500 monthly pixel events, which is pretty much anybody taking an action on your website. So viewing your product page, adding something to cart. So if you're not getting 500 of them per month, then as it says there, it's going to be difficult to drive sales. Moving on to the next point. So when it comes to creating lookalike audiences, essentially this is pretty much the foundations of every ad set and campaign I build, just purely because lookalike audiences are based on people who have already performed certain actions. So if you take 2 customers, then a customer who hasn't done anything and knows nothing about your business, and then you take a customer that's shown an interest and actually been to your product page, then obviously this customer who knows who you are, knows what products you're selling, has been to your product page, it's going to be so much easier to convert that person. So essentially we want to try and find more people like that person, and that's exactly what lookalike audiences are, which is why I base pretty much all my Facebook ads around lookalike audiences. But one key thing I want to show you guys here, which is your lookalike audiences will refresh themselves every 3 to 7 days, as long as you're still actively targeting ads to it. So as long as you're still adding people to that audience, then essentially it will keep refreshing. Moving on to the next and final point before we actually get into the strategy, is you can create up to 500 lookalike audiences from a single source audience. So I don't hear anybody else mention this, which is when you have a custom audience, then you obviously base on that custom audience to create a lookalike audiences. But what you can actually do is keep basing on that original audience source to create up to 500 lookalike audiences, if that makes sense. So again, I just want you guys to know these points and keep them in the back of your mind as we work through this strategy. So the ultimate Facebook ad strategy then, as it says there in brackets, for new pixels, because the strategy ultimately will be differently if, for example, if you've already sold a product within the dog niche. If you try and sell a different product within the dog niche, then your strategy is going to be different. This is the best strategy for brand new pixels or brand new niches, and essentially where Facebook has no past data on who your ideal customer is going to be. So step one, or ad set one, then is going to be a traffic ad set. Now, I might get a bit of hate for this, but I'm basing this on the complete beginner then who has pretty much no experience when it comes to Facebook ads, because the reason traffic ad sets are better is because they're going to bring in more visitors than what a website conversion ad set will do. If you go straight for purchases, for instance, then you're not going to get as many visitors as you would using a traffic ad set. And if we go back to that Facebook point of needing 500 pixel events per month before you start going out for conversions, then this is why I like to start traffic ad sets. Now, a key note here is, because a lot of people will ask this question, is that yes, you can still be successful if you use website conversion objectives right off the bat, but if you do, then your actual ad copy and the audience you're going after needs to be more on point than it does with the traffic ad set. Because when you go straight for purchases, if you're selling a really good product and you put it in front of an audience that loves that product, then automatically you're going to get engagement and you're going to get traffic. So essentially you're going to get what the traffic ad set would, plus the chances, or a better chance, of those website conversions. But like I said, then this video is aimed at pretty much the beginner who might not necessarily get that ad copy and their audience on point from the very beginning. So that being said, then enough talking, let's actually get into what this strategy entails. So the first ad set is going to be a traffic ad set. It's going to be £50 per day. Now this is up to you. This is how I would actually do it. I would start with £50 per day, but depending on what your budget is, you might start with less than this. But just keep this in mind: the more data you have, then the better informed and educated decisions you'll be able to make, because obviously you're going to get, the more numbers and more data you have, then the better decisions you can make. Because if, for example, if you take product testing as an example, if you get one person to test a product and they love it, that's not a good enough kind of overall scope of the market to see if people are going to like your product. Whereas if you get 1,000 people to test your product, then only like the very first person you show it to might love it, and then everybody else might hate it. And that's going to tell you more information about that product, if that makes sense. So what I'm trying to say then is, if you can afford £50 per day, then go for it. But if not, then just stick to what you can afford. But just keep in mind that obviously the more data you have, the better educated decisions you'll be able to make. So £50 per day budget, and that's going to bring approximately 150 visitors a day if you do your job correctly. And what I mean by that then is you've got a decent product and you're putting it in front of the right audience. So two things then to keep your eye on. Number one, which is the relevance score. This score is not the be all and end all, because I've had ad sets that have had a relevance score of like 4 and 5, but they've still been really profitable. But for traffic ad sets, then what I want you to do is get that score as high as possible, because the higher that score is, then essentially the better your audience is reacting to your ad, and the better reach and cheaper CPM you're going to achieve, which is key then to getting maximum coverage and essentially achieving the lowest cost per link click as possible. As I mentioned in the intro, I managed to achieve 40p per action. Now this will vary. If you get confused or if you're not achieving a certain number that doesn't really match and you're not really sure what to do, then feel free to reach out. All my social media links are in the video description. So essentially this is what we're going to be aiming for, and that's going to bring approximately then 100 visitors per day. And if you obviously work the averages out over the course of a month, that's going to be way over 500 per month, which is essentially what Facebook recommend before you start going after website conversions. So once you hit 500 visitors, then, so this is where we're going to create ad set number 2. Then we're going to choose purchase as our conversion objective, and we're going to use a 7-day click as well, because essentially what this does then is, going back to that original point of needing 50 conversions per week, then what it does, if somebody clicks on our ad, then within 7 days, if they then perform a purchase, they get counted towards those 50 conversions. So if you were to only choose a 1-day click and somebody purchased, say 48 hours later, they don't get counted. So essentially you're not going to be gathering as much data. So to begin with then, until you're achieving pretty much 50 purchases per day, then I'll pretty much leave all of my ad sets on 7-day click. So ad set number 2 then, it's going to be our first lookalike audience. It's going to be the first 1%, which is going to be the smallest amount and more focused audience. And it's going to be based on the people or the conversion objectives of view content and add to cart, if you have any. If you've had 500 visitors, if you wait to that point, then as long as you're targeting, like I mentioned earlier, the right audience with the right product, then you're bound to get at least one person add to cart, if not purchase. So this first lookalike audience then is going to be based on the people that have done exactly those actions. Now, as we move this strategy, then you'll probably realize a common theme, which is creating lookalike audiences. Now, lookalike audiences are key to succeeding just purely because you'll have a much easier time trying to sell a product to somebody who is similar to someone who has already shown an interest, essentially. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but this is absolute key with Facebook ads. If you try and sell a product to cold traffic, so somebody who doesn't even know who you are, then that's going to be a lot more difficult than trying to sell it to what I call warm or hot traffic, which is essentially people who have seen you before, or similar to people who have seen you before. So going back to ad set number 2 then, we'll get this our first lookalike audience, the first 1% based on people who have view contented and added to cart. Now once we hit 100 add to carts, we hit that minimum threshold for creating a lookalike audience, which is 100 people. Once you have 100 people in an audience, you can then go ahead and use that to base on and create another lookalike audience. Now Facebook recommends the base audience should be anywhere from 1,000 to I think 5,000 or 50,000 people. But the whole point of this strategy then is building up to ad set number 4, because ultimately then we want to get to that point in ad set 4 where we have 100 purchases that we can then base on and create a lookalike audience. Because when it comes to creating LLAs, then it's quality over quantity. So essentially what we want to do is we want to be telling Facebook to base or create an audience then based on our most ideal situation, which is obviously customers who have made a purchase. So back to ad set number 2 then, once we hit those 100 add to carts, we then move on to ad set number 3. Now there's 2 ways to play this. If your ad set number 2 is bringing in a profit for you, then what I recommend you do is just leave that ad set, let it run, let it keep bringing you money in, because the more money you can bring in, the more money you'll have to then reinvest into your Facebook ads. However, if it's not profitable, then what you should do is create your lookalike audience and simply change the target audience within the ad set level. I showed you guys earlier that Facebook states that ad sets convert on an ad set level. So the more kind of data we can keep in one particular ad set, then the better chance we have of that particular ad set of actually succeeding. So once you've created a new ad set then, or amended number 2, then essentially we're going to be tagging people a lookalike audience based on our add to carts. And add to cart is obviously a better conversion than view content because it's closer to our ultimate goal then, which is people who make a purchase. So once we hit 100 purchases then within that ad set, we're then going to go ahead and create number 4, or again, if it's not profitable, simply amend it within the ad set level, and create a lookalike audience then based on those 100 purchases. As I mentioned earlier, that's the minimum threshold before we can create a lookalike audience, and this is essentially what we've been striving towards. This is where we want to get as soon as possible, because this is going to be the highest quality audience. So we want to start taking advantage of that as soon as possible. And essentially what we're going to do is once we have this final ad set that has a target audience of lookalike purchases, then essentially we can move into things like scaling. However, I am going to talk more than that later on in the video. So to kind of summarize it then, essentially you may have up to 4 ad sets running. You're going to have the one, what I call lead gatherer, which is this ad set number 1, which is essentially just bringing people onto your store, and people are only going to come on your store then if they've got an interest in who you are and what you're selling. And if they have that interest, then the chances are some of them are going to add to cart at the very minimum, if not actually make a purchase as well. And once you hit 1,000 purchases, then once your custom audience has 1,000 purchases in, then you can run ad sets for lookalike audiences based on purchase only. So there's a couple of things you can do. Again, I'll talk about that later in the video as we get on to scaling down here. And you pretty much start the process again then with your top 100 spenders. So as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to creating lookalike audiences, you want the highest quality possible audiences possible. So once you hit 1,000 purchases, you can then narrow them down to the top 100 spenders. So instead of say basing an audience on people who have just bought anything, you can say actually let's just target the top 100 people who have spent say over £20, because obviously that's a stronger audience, that's a stronger conversion. Somebody spending say £20 with you instead of £10, obviously we want more people like the people spending £20, if that makes sense. And then as it says here, just to kind of reiterate it, this is really important, and the quality of your audience is key, not the quantity. So key points then to take away from this video: keep feeding winning ad sets so you stay above the 50 conversion threshold. So once an ad set drops below that 50 conversions per week, then it enters what's called a learning phase. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can go out there and Google it, which is essentially, it basically means that Facebook isn't going to be delivering your ad optimally. So if an ad set is winning, then just make sure you keep it above that threshold to keep it out of that learning phase essentially. Another key point then is make sure you stay above 500 website visitors per month or 500 pixel events, just so you've got a decent amount of traffic coming on your store basically, so you can keep building up those custom audiences, keep building up the data, and then you're always going to have those people who have performed certain actions that you can then use to create more lookalike audiences essentially. Now I'm not saying you've got to keep ad set number one, your traffic ad set, to generate traffic to your store. What I'm saying is that once you get to the point where you're bringing on significant traffic through ad set number 4 then, which is your purchase LLA, then as long as you stay above those 500 visitors per month, then there's no need for that traffic ad set. That's purely there to start the process essentially. What we're trying to do here is pretty much build up to this point where we've got 100 purchases as quick as possible. But as you start to scale things out and you've got say 5, 6 or even 10 ad sets all based on lookalike audiences or all based on purchases, then you're automatically going to get those visitors without actually actively having to have a traffic ad set, if that makes sense. So that being said, let's move quickly onto scaling. Now, I'm sorry if this video has been completely over the place. There's been so much to get through. I didn't want to leave any details out. I want to try and give you guys all the information up front, but naturally there are going to be questions, so feel free to just ask away in the comment section down below. I do get back to every single person. So scaling wise then, there's loads of different things you can do, but kind of like the main 4. So you can create more lookalike audiences then and increase the audience size. So obviously you start off with the 1% as they're going to be the closest people. Then you can go to 2% of your country population, 3%, 4%, and so on and so on. You can create more lookalike audiences. I think I briefly mentioned this earlier, based on the same source. Now, not a lot of people talk about this, but you can actually do it. And it's always worth doing as well, because you're not always going to get that same percentage of people, and one audience might work a lot better than another one, something you guys need to test and experiment with. But one thing to be wary of then is just be wary of audience overlap. So what this is when you create 2 audiences, you can compare them then within the audience section of your ad manager account, and it's going to tell you if that audience is overlapping with each other or not. Because if there's a high percentage of audience overlap, then essentially the ad set's going to be competing against each other. Point number 3 then, so you can increase the budgets obviously of your LLA ad sets. And again, one thing to be wary of if you do go this route is just be wary of your frequency, because depending on what country you choose to go ahead, then the audience size is going to vary. And if you're spending big numbers, then there's going to come a point where everybody within that audience will have seen your ad, and you're going to be spending money to show the same people your ad 2, 3, maybe even 4 times. And then the 4th and final point, I had to put this in there because I've had results creating lookalike audiences from view contents, from add to carts. I'm not purchase. In hindsight, is always going to be the best thing, because ultimately that's what we want our customers to do, and so we want more customers like the customers who have made purchases. But that's not to say you won't find results experimenting then with other conversion objectives. So That being said then guys, that pretty much wraps up the video. I apologize if I've talked really fast and rambled on and haven't made sense at points. As I said earlier, feel free to ask as many questions as possible. This Facebook ad strategy really does work. As you can see, it kind of goes on the guidelines that Facebook recommends. You can see the kind of results I've been able to produce implementing this strategy as well. So one thing I do ask, actually, if you do actually go and use this strategy, then make sure you come back, let me know what kind of results you get. And that being said then, if you're still watching, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please drop the video a like, and any questions at all, then leave a comment down below. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.